May it be a light for you in dark places when all other lights go out.
Hey guys, it's DCHL Devin here, and welcome to another episode of A Light in the Dark. And today we are going to go ahead and finish, finally, the new source book, There and Back Again. It's been quite a while, I believe about a month since the book has come out, so this is long past due, but we are finally on Dul Guldur. This is going to be Azog's Hunters, which is actually kind of already using units that you're already very aware of. I'm just going to briefly touch up on them, and a couple of the other units sprinkled in here. So let's go ahead and get into it as far as Azog's Hunters. Now, if you guys don't know, Azog's army has been kind of split into two areas. Azog's Legion, which we covered in our last video, it was pretty much monsters with the Gundabad Warriors as a main unit. And now we have Azog's Hunters. So Azog's Hunters are pretty much the force that's led by Bolg, most notably seen in the Barrels Out of Bond scene when they come and rescue them there. That is pretty much what we're looking at, with a very, very slight additions, mostly because of the fact that they also, I believe, let's see. All right, well, let's see what they have. They have Azog, Bolg. Azog would be the slight addition, kinda, but I guess you could also say this is during the parts where they were chasing Thorn's company all throughout the entire series. So this is, I guess, all of that. So Azog, Bolg, Yazneg, Narzug, Fimble the Hunter, Hunter Orc Captains, Hunter Orcs, and Fel Wargs. So this doesn't have any Gundabads, it's just purely Hunter Orcs. Guys, if you only do this faction, you go pure, then you can get 50% of your army as bows, and you actually have your shoot value improved by 1. So now you have 50% orcs with bows firing at shoot value 4. So this is an army I'm pretty sure will be quite popular, especially for the fact that for some reason Hunter Orcs have strength 4 and 2 attacks, all at a really, really cheap price. So you combine that with now the fact that they're actually good at shooting. This is something I'm thinking is going to be popular. I mean, obviously these guys are highly weak to arrow fire, so yes, they can dish a lot out. But if they get outshot by, like, let's say, Rivendell Knights or something like that, then there might be some problems. But I guess it kind of depends. If you have way more bows than them, you might scare them off. So I guess hobbits might cause you problems. But if we go ahead and look at the army list, I'm not going to cover, obviously, the entire thing. We'll do that in a how to play, how to buy kind of series. But I'll go into Yazneg. Yazneg's been put back into this book. Right now, off of an initial glance, I can't see what has changed about him. I think they just kind of redid the price of failure rule, just kind of clarifying some bits. But otherwise, it looks pretty much exactly the same. He's got roughly the same profile. I'm not seeing too much of a difference here with him. Just in case you guys see it, it's he might have got a points reduction. That might be the only thing. I actually don't know what his previous points were, but he might have got a points reduction. But other than that, he's fight 4, strength 4, defense 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 3 courage, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He has armor and a 2-handed axe. Can get a Fel Warg and a lance. So even if you fully equip him, which I'd recommend you do, I think you should give him everything in his options. Even if you do it, he's still very cheap. And he has the price of failure, which is if your army contains both Azog and Yazneg, and the two are in base contact at the beginning of your move phase, instead of rolling the dice to make a courage test, when the evil force is broken, you can remove Yazneg from play. If you do so, Azog is considered to have automatically passed his courage test, and his standfast will affect the entire battlefield. Furthermore, if Yazneg is removed from play in this way, then while Azog is alive, all Hunter Orcs, Hunter Orc Captains, Fimble, and Narzug reroll failed courage tests. Now notice that this kind of leaves out Bolg. I guess Bolg is kind of assured that he's not going to take his fury out on his own son, but yeah, it's just everyone else. They all reroll failed courage tests. Not that Bolg really needs it. Bolg has a courage of 5, so he should be fine on most courage tests anyway, but everyone else is pretty much I mean, yes, very useful little ability. What I would do is basically throw in Yazneg, burning out all his might, kind of throw him in there like a grenade, and then bring him back once you're starting to lose the battle. Of course, trying not to get him killed too much, but definitely throw him in there because that lance is the only lance you have as far as the captains. He hits hard. This is probably the hardest hitting captain unit of the three of them, Narzug, Fimble, and Yazneg. So let's go into another faction. The reason why is because everything else is stuff you've already known before. The Hunter Orcs have not changed. The Felwargs have not changed. Everything else, Fimble, Narzeg, all of them haven't changed at all. So now we're going to go into Dul Guldur. This is a faction I've been really waiting for a while. I've actually really wanted to see what it would look like even in the movies, before the movies even displayed it. I'm like, oh, what kind of new spirits and stuff do we get? We got some really weird spirits on screen. So it wasn't anything like we saw in the Ringwraiths of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now these Ringwraiths teleport around. And they kind of like are ghostly spectrals, like you kill them, they phase back in and stuff like that. And I was kind of wondering, okay, well, that might be a bit far-fetched for the game. I'm not sure if they're going to include that in, but let's see what they do. And they included it in the game. So this is great news. That makes this army really fun to play. So let's go into it. The Necromancer, of course, being the main leader of this group. What happened to him? Well, one, he's the exact same cost, which is good. He already was very pricey. Well, he was good for his points, but he just already had a very high points value. Stayed the exact same points. His stats have not changed at all. In fact, most of his abilities have not changed at all. He only gained a new ability and 2 new spells. So going into the 2 new spells, he gained Curse, which we finally see who has Curse. We kind of all suspected it would be the Necromancer. But if you guys don't know, it actually removes a fate point every time it's successfully cast. A channeled version of this drops their fate down to 0. And then your staff is broken, which of course we saw in the movies. He broke Gandalf's staff, and this is extremely appropriate for him. In fact, I'm expecting Sauron to get a similar ability once he's updated. So other than that, he hasn't changed. The only rule he got, you can't understand until you actually read the Nazgul, the new Dul Guldur Nazgul, which is basically he resurrects them easier. So we'll get into that. What I'm going to do is skip instead to the Nazgul. I'm actually going to skip the Keeper of the Dungeons. He's another unit. I'm going to jump right to the Nazgul, and then we'll go back to them. And so the Nazgul, they are, how do I say it? I don't know. To say their points, they're a hefty, a little under 100 points, let's say it that way. But they're a pretty hefty point cost. So they have Fight 5, Strength 4, Defense 6, 2 attacks, 1 wound, Courage 6, and then Might, Will, Fate is 2-1-0. So immediately looking at their profile, this is a much weakened Ringwraith. Yes, same fight value, yes, same strength, but Defense 6 means they will die much faster. This won't actually matter as much as it sounds. Then you have 2 attacks, of course, a much more combat-y form of Wraith, which is what we saw in the movies. These guys are meant to go in combat. 1 wound, so easily to kill. 6 courage means they're not failing any courage tests, and then 2 might. It's just a little bit different than we've seen before. I mean, of course, the Ringwraiths usually have 0 to start off with, but 2 is great. And then 1 will, so obviously they're not magic casters, and 0 fate. So Terror, Harbinger of Evil, which is great. I'm glad these guys have Harbinger of Evil. It's actually a subtle effect you kind of forget about occasionally, but it's already a great ability to have. And then, of course, 1 of the 9. So there's some debate online about how exactly certain names work, because, like, for instance, Kamul. Kamul's very obviously you can't, like, duplicate him, but what about the others? Guys, you're supposed to play this pretty logically. You can only have 9 Ringwraiths. Regardless of whether you get ones on fell beasts or ones riding horses or these ones, you can only have 9. So pretty much just be nice to each other on this and don't be gamey with rules and say, well, this is a Nazgul of Dul Guldur, so therefore it's just 9 Ringwraiths. So that's basically what that paragraph says. Then they have this rule, Unholy Resurrection. If a model with this special rule is slain, place a marker where it was removed from the board. In the next priority phase, after priority has been rolled, roll a d6. On a 3+, the model regains 1 wound and may be placed anywhere within 6 inches of the marker, so long as it is not placed in base contact with an enemy model. Any might or will points that were spent remain spent. While the marker is in play, the Nazgul counts as on the board for all intents and purposes. If a roll of a 1 or 2, then the Nazgul has been banished. Remove the marker and the Nazgul from play. Wounds caused by magical powers or elven blades inflict a -1 penalty on the Unholy Resurrection roll. So a couple things to note about this. All right, so obviously these guys are very difficult to kill. You could almost relate this to a 3-up invuln these guys permanently have, but of course instead they keep popping up in new places. I have playtested these now twice, just because I'm very interested in these. And you'll find newer players will tend to overly focus on them. In fact, if they've never seen this before, they'll overly focus on them. I once tied up Elrond and Linder and a whole bunch of Rivendell Knight Cav, all on like 2 of these guys. And I mean, they were just fighting them all day, even with Elven Blades. I just managed to get 4-ups, all right? Because remember, like it said, Elven Blades penalize the roll where you get 4-up instead of 3-up. And so, I mean, they just don't really die. And the worst part is you don't know when they're going to die. This isn't like the Necromancer or the Undying, where you can slowly keep track of how much it takes to kill them, or the Castellans. You have no idea if these guys will ever die. It's all completely based on a bad dice roll. And so your opponent might get in this point where he's like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and ignore them after a while, because after killing them so many times and they keep coming back, they're just like, all right, screw it. And I almost would advise the same, pretty much. I would almost ignore these guys, if I could, if there's another rest of the army to fight, and you're not just fighting like 8 of these things. These are really kind of tough to take down. Obviously, Elven Blades being the go-to. Elves are full of them. Most other armies are not. So, you know, otherwise you're getting a 3-up. By the way, the Necromancer, he adds +1 to this roll. So if you have the Necromancer in play, then you can do this on a 2-up. Which means you're really never killing them. Obviously, if you have magic in your army, so you can Black Dart these things, you can Sorcerer's Blast them, Banish, of course, trying to get rid of them, making their penalize go further, but you could theoretically be fighting these things all day. And so that's the one reason I'm almost like, I probably would just sort of ignore them. Maybe throwing a couple troops, but I certainly wouldn't overly focus on these guys. Now, can you use might in order to bring back this roll? The answer is no. There is a list of what might can be used for, and this is not on that list. Note that Bjorn, if you want an example, Bjorn says you can might his roll to change form. They wouldn't say that if you just could assume that all abilities could be mighted. You can only might things on that list, which is like tests and certain, there's like 5 different things you can might. So just note that this is not one of them. That's actually good. If you think about it, you can take a couple of these ring rays, and now you have 8 points of might, but if you could resurrect them with that point of might, you actually would start saving your might. Now that you know you can't do that, you actually tend to just throw them at the enemy and start spending might and just grabbing heroes and such like that. These things can be very annoying in that way, because after you kill them, they'll just teleport toward your enemy's closest hero. Yeah, they can't be in base contact, but they can be a millimeter away. So it doesn't say you can't be in their zone of control, so you can be like right next to them. Note that, of course, if you do that, they can leave your zone of control at the start of their move if they move first. So they can definitely be really, really annoying in that way. I noticed also there's certain forms of these things that can start to keep up even with cavalry. Also, their teleportation is exactly that. It's teleportation. So you can jump back and forth through walls. That's not a problem at all. So if you need to escape or something like that, you can teleport right on top of a building. Also note that you just bring them back, where is it? Within 6 inches. So I guess... yeah, it's pretty much, you can almost kind of cheat and get a little bit of that 7th inch. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can kind of look on the GBHL page. They kind of went over this with a little chart and diagram. But you don't have to actually keep it inside his base wholly within that circle. It's sort of like any area effect spell. If it just clips the base, then you're good. So yeah, these special rules, actually, I've used quite a bit. I don't know how else to address them. As of right now, I've only played with it twice. These are such unusual units that you really need a lot of playtesting with these. I mean, obviously, teleporting in the backfields and stuff like that. Oh, and by the way, I actually regard these as anti-Fellbeast. We've been talking about it with me and a couple other friends, and what you're looking at is a unit that ties up Fellbeast. And I bring up Fellbeast on purpose because they're very competitive units that a lot of people want an answer to. And so, not that they're broken or anything, but these things, because they don't die, the Ringwraith will end up just sort of wasting all of his will fighting these things. +3 equal fight, 2 attacks, and they can kind of keep up with them. So, let's go into the next rule. When choosing a which Nazgul to field, pick one option that from the list that follows. Each Nazgul may be taken once unless otherwise stated. So basically, you get 7 different options here. You might be wondering why I say 7. It's actually because it's one of them can be taken twice. In fact, two of them can be taken twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So let's go into it. Witch King of Angmar. Basically, these are buffs. So you take the profile that you got, and now you add this buff on top of it. So the Witch King of Angmar has armor and a sword. All of them do have different weapon types. And he has Angmar Arisen, which is he has 3 points of might instead of 2. I actually love this one. This is actually one of the main ones I pick. K'mul the Easterling has armor and a 2-handed mace. He has Runish Fury. K'mul has 3 attacks instead of 2. Believe it or not, I actually wasn't too impressed by this one. It sounds weird, but 3 attacks, you would think, oh man, that's impressive. It is. It is impressive. I absolutely would bring it, but for some reason during my playtesting experiences, it didn't really work out as well as I wanted it to. But yes, that's another really good one. The Dark Headsman. If the Dark Headsman scores a natural roll of a 6 when rolling to wound, then that strike causes not 1 wound, but D3 wounds. This is the one I actually don't care about the most. Just because you have to score a natural 6, so you can't even might the roll. It's so luck-based that I'm just like, you basically might as well have forfeited your special rule for most games that you're going to play. I'd say in a 5-game tournament, this might come into effect maybe a couple times at most. So this is the one I actually wouldn't pick. Now you might say, okay, what about the axe and a piercing strike? That is useful, I can say, but I think these guys are strong enough to take on most targets. But if I really want killing power, I think I'd rather take K'mul with 3 attacks than this guy. But let's go with the next one, the Forsaken. The Forsaken has armor and a trident spear. Basically, it's just a spear. Would you ever want to spear support through units? Maybe. I usually would rather throw these guys in combat. But let's go ahead. Additionally, the Forsaken must re-roll, so it counts as a spear, and additionally, he must re-roll all failed rolls to wound. Once again, I think personally this is a lot better than the Dark Headsman. This is not luck-based, and I think most targets in the game will start to fall apart on 2 wounds, but, you know, who knows? Maybe you'll get that natural 6, but otherwise, I like this guy quite a bit. The Lingering Shadow. This one's my favorite one. I really like his ability. He has armor and a sword, and he has unnatural speed. After priority has been rolled, the controlling player may remove the Lingering Shadow from the board and place him anywhere within 3 inches of where he originally was. Note, the Lingering Shadow may not be placed in base contact with an enemy model. So this guy gets his teleportation despite the fact that he didn't die, except it's 3 inches instead. And he keeps doing that at the beginning of every priority after it's been rolled. So what you can do is you can kind of keep yourself out of charge range if you don't have priority. So let's say you're 6 inches, I don't know, 6 inches from the opponent, and you notice, oh, you lost priority and you don't want to get charged. Or like, let's say it's a cavalry element, so you keep them like 7 inches away. Then you teleport back 3 inches, or I'm sorry, 8 inches away. So you teleport back 3 inches, get him out of charge range, and he can't be charged anymore because your opponent won priority. Or if you won priority and you know he's not going to counter it, then you teleport forward 3 inches, and now you can charge them because you went from 8 to 5, and now you can charge your cav element. So these guys are very good. This guy is a very good anti-cav unit. It's also just very good at speed. This sense he can obviously travel effectively 9 inches a turn, and he also can get to things like, whereas the others have to wait to die in order to teleport on a building or something like that, this guy can always grab whatever he's going after. So this is the Lingering Shadow has been pretty much my first pick every single time. Now let's go into the next one, the Abyssal Knights. These ones you can actually field 2 of them, and I actually would. I love these guys as well. An army may include up to 2 Abyssal Knights. In the priority phase, after priority has been rolled, the controlling player can choose to remove one of the Abyssal Knights from the board and immediately place it in base contact with the other, so long as it is not also placed in base contact with an enemy model. This does not count as moving. So, what we're looking at here is, oh, and by the way, these guys have armor and elven blades. So remember those elven blades that actually can minus your resurrection rolls? Well, these guys kind of help against that because they make it so that elven blade wielding characters don't automatically win the fight. I mean, obviously, unless they have higher fight, but you know what I mean. They will help stop that 3-up the good side wins aspect of the elven blades. Even if not that, then if the opponent doesn't have an elven blade, then these guys are fantastic in fights. But what I've noticed is I just tend to split these guys up in 2 different directions, kind of depending on where my opponent is. And the fact that you can teleport one to the other is great. You can actually cause this threat that your opponent sort of didn't see coming. It's sort of not in their mind at that point. But also, when you're in combat, naturally things are going to start moving. So like, let's say you're in combat, these two are together. You've already teleported them together. And you call a hurt combat, one of them moves even further, then the next turn the other one just teleports to him, and then you're all both on a hero. Like because they can keep jumping to each other, you can, even in the midst of a combat, start to really help each other out. I've actually seen this work quite a few times. I like the Abyssal Knights. These are actually really great units. And the last one is the Slayer of Men. Once again, you can take 2 of these. Armor and a 2-handed mace. Deadly Strength. The Nazgul, known only as the Slayer... I'm sorry, that's fluff. An army may include up to 2 Slayers of Men. Additionally, a Slayer of Men never suffers the -1 penalty when wielding a 2-handed weapon. So he has a 2-handed base, like I said, so he gets +1 to all his wound rolls. This is very similar to the Forsaken. These guys are just hard hitters. I never tested them, but we can obviously see these guys would be pretty deadly. Especially against high armored units like Iron Hills, stuff like that, because they'll start to take them out. They only need 5s. So that is pretty much it for all of them. You'll notice there are technically 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 options. So despite that there's 11 options, you'll never be able to take them all. Long story short, you will always be missing a couple of these. So, but that's it. And remember, these guys pretty much never die. You never know when they're going to actually die because it's just based on a random lucky dice roll. So the question is, how many of these do you take in like 600, 800 points? At 600 points, the Necromancer does not work. I've tried to fit him in so many different ways. Me and Jake have played around with this list quite a bit. I've even talked to people overseas. There's no way, competitively, it's very difficult to get the Necromancer in at 600 points. You can probably try it, but I wouldn't. At 700, 800 points is when he starts to make up his value quite a bit, and you can do a lot more. Now, keep in mind, these guys can lead troops. These are the main faction leaders of Dul Guldur, so you're not just buying them, you're also buying adding a warband. But what I have found myself doing at 600 points is probably leading about 4 of these. Just 4, and then a bunch of Hunter Orcs, Gun to Battle Orcs, stuff like that. So at 800, of course, you can flex it around. And if you add them all up, I believe if you get the Keeper of the Dungeons, the Necromancer, plus all 9 of these, you get 1,000 points, which is actually convenient for Middle-earth's Deadliest Heroes. If you guys don't know about that, that's an event we have at Nova for 1,000 points, all heroes. So I actually am looking forward to someone bringing this and someone bringing Thorin's Company, which also conveniently hits 1,000 points once you add them all up. So that's actually kind of why we picked that number. I'm always looking for that, like, yes, you did it right. So let's go ahead back to the last hero in Dul Guldur, which is the Keeper of the Dungeons. Keeper of the Dungeons is the same price actually as those Nazgul. Once again, can't get into it, but it's a little under 100 points. He is Fight 5. Oh, by the way, if you don't know who Keeper of the Dungeons is, it's Golb. It's a name I know Jake Lair and Adam Troke will not acknowledge the name of Golb, but Damien and Tom with their SBG magazine have done an excellent job making this thing stick. So that's the name we will always know him by forever, is Golb. So congratulations, Tom and Damien. Your legacy will now live on forever. But here we are, Keeper of the Dungeons, Golb. Has Fight 5, Strength 5, Defense 6, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 5 courage. Now, I don't remember what Damien and Tom put him as, but I think it was pretty similar to this. I think it was just a depowered version of Bolg. And so what we're looking at here is a pretty average, like, mid-tier hero kind of thing. 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate, which is good. He's just a wrecking ball kind of thing. The reason I say that is because he has armor, a sword, and a 2-handed pick. The 2-handed pick, he has Burly. So he's Strength 5 with 2 attacks, all at +1 to wound. So that's not too bad. Then he has Torturer. Torturer is basically, once again, a depowered version of Bolg. Every time the Keeper of the Dungeon slays a model, keep note of it. Once he has killed 1 or 2 models, he may re-roll to wound rolls of 1. So once he kills 2 models, he just gets that. He can re-roll 1s, which is great because he already has +1 to wound, so I guess it just makes him that much more killy. Once he has killed 3 or more models, so he just kills 1 more, he gains Terror, which is also pretty handy if you have a Nazgul around with Harbinger of Evil. Then, once he has killed 5 or more models, he re-rolls all failed rolls to wound. So, I mean, keep in mind, we're only talking about 2 attacks. So, that's good, but I wouldn't use him just to tally this ability. Like with Bolg, you know, he's getting 3 points of might, he's activating for your army, and he's going nuts. With this guy, he's just becoming a little more powerful. So I guess it basically means it's guaranteed he'll probably wound and kill his targets. But overall, just remember, he only has really 2 attacks to work with. So then he has next thing, you have something my master wants. The Keeper of the Dungeons gets a bonus of +1 to wound against any model that bears one of the Elven rings. Nenya, Narya, and Vilya. That is, of course, Elrond, Gandalf, and Galadriel. Which makes this guy the second model in the game to be the one who can auto-wound. Now, if you guys don't know what I mean by that, Goblin Prowlers are a model that can auto-wound in this game by doing piercing strikes, trapping their opponent, doing a 2-handed weapon strike as well, and therefore you get 2 +1 bonuses. That's very key, because in this game, the wound chart does not go below 3. Well, so that means you need 2 +1 bonuses in order to get past it. You have Burly, that's your first +1 with this character, and now against Gandalf and all of them, you now have another +1. Effectively meaning if you piercing strike and all that stuff, then you also will auto-wound these characters. So I can see him sort of hunting down Gandalf and Galadriel. He probably will only do it with Galadriel Elrond a little bit better. So Elrond's going to kick this guy's butt. So I'm not really sure how well he'll do there. Maybe he might need some help. With Galadriel, he might stand a chance on his own, depending on which version you're talking about. If you're talking about the war form, the old Galadriel has 1 more attack plus an extra point of fight. So she's going to keep up with this guy pretty easily. Gandalf, of course, is completely screwed. So, but other than that, though, that's a cool little fluffy rule, and I can see many people with Keeper of the Dungeons chasing around these characters, just because you get +2 to wound against them. Other than that, if we go into the factions and what exactly they can lead, we're talking about they can get Gundabad Orcs, Hunter Orc Captains. Forgive me, guys, if you see it, hear any noise, just people walking around. But yeah, Gundabad Orcs, Hunter Orcs, and Hunter Orc Captains, and then here, hold on, let me go into it. So here we are. So the Army of Dul Guldur is the Necromancer of Dul Guldur, Nazgul of Dul Guldur, Keeper of the Dungeons, Gundabad Orc Captains, Hunter Orc Captains, Gundabad Orc Warriors, Hunter Orcs, and Fel Wargs. So it's actually a pretty sizable list, and if you take solely this list, then you can always add an extra dice to the Necromancer whenever he tries to cast spells. Now, note that this is not a free point to cast. It means that you're just adding another one. So it's not like Gandalf or all the others. Yeah, basically you spend 3, you now get 4. Other than that, that's the sad part about Dul Guldur's faction, I would say. At 600 points, playing pure Dul Guldur is actually kind of pointless. You will lose your faction ability, because as I mentioned, the Necromancer, if you're not fielding him, which he's not really viable at 600 points or less, then your faction special rule isn't doing you any good. So I kind of wish they had added an extra faction rule of some sort, so that way we could see some benefit at those lower point games. But we're not going to see that. So other than that, though, that is their faction. Now let me backtrack just 1 second, because I actually forgot something that a lot of people are probably mad at. There's something I mentioned in the previous video, Azog's Legion, Bolg. Bolg gets this special rule where he can give Morgul Shot to all Hunter Orcs. I wanted to mention that because some people might be like, why didn't you talk about that with Azog's Hunters? It's just because I accidentally talked about it in the previous video. But basically, you remember that 4-up shoot value and 50% bows that you get? Well, they also get the Morgul Shot special rule if you include Bolg, which of course now is a must-take in that list at this point. If you do that, then every time you wound a character or monster and you don't kill him, so that means it has like, more than 1 wound, then every single turn they have to roll a dice, and on a 1 they suffer another wound. So basically you just poisoned them. And this happens over the effect of the entire game, or in the case of campaigns, over the course of the entire campaign, which is actually pretty scary in the sense of a campaign, so don't get shot by these things. But yeah, just a quick note on that, their archery is very powerful. And then of course we're done with Dul Guldur. So now we go into the last faction. Now I didn't cover Smaug. All that happened with Smaug was they clarified what he does against Mumakil. But other than that, he hasn't really changed. Dark Denizens of Mirkwood. So the Dark Denizens of Mirkwood are now what I would call almost a full faction at this point. They only have 1 hero, so but they don't have a faction special rule, so it doesn't matter if you actually kind of branch out and grab Shelob or Druzhag or Ashrak or whoever. So the Dark Denizens of Mirkwood consist of the Spider Queen, which is a named character now, as according to the FAQ, and it contains Mirkwood spiders, fell wargs, and then it says if you include the Mori and Angmar source book, which basically means that these just guys are included, but if you include that source book, then they also have giant spiders and bat swarms. So it's 4 units: Mirkwood spiders, giant spiders, fell wargs, bat swarms. That makes this army pretty much a little sub-faction that's actually a sizable little force. If you guys don't know, Mirkwood spiders changed. That's the only thing that changed. All the others are the same. Now, keep in mind, they don't have war bats. So just note about that. I know it kind of sucks, but we can obviously say that Azog most likely led them for war. He bred them for war. The Mirkwood spiders have changed drastically. Before being a terrible unit I would never recommend you take, now they are fantastic units, with the only disadvantage to them being their base size, which is actually something J-Clair can't even control. So let's see what you get. First off, they have a 5-point reduction, which is great. They are now the same price as the old giant spiders. And for all of that, you get 10 movement now, not 8. So their movement has increased. You get fight 2, which means they have stayed the same there. Strength 5, defense 3, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, and 2 courage. So a little less courageous and a little less fight worthy than their smaller counterparts, which is actually kind of interesting. They have Terror, which is different from their smaller boys, and then they have Venom. So this is different from the poisoned weapons rule that the other spiders have. The other ones just reroll 1s. You need Ashrak in order to upgrade them, and then you still got to spend 2 more points. These guys, by default, get the Venom special rule, which is they reroll all failed rolls to wound. And that is great. I have found that oftentimes, if you're going to swing, you basically have 4 dice to go for. I mean, well, okay, 4 attempts to kill a 1-wound model. Obviously, if he has more than that, then you're just going to get 2 wounds. But usually they kill whatever they're going after. They're glass cannons, effectively. Then they have movement, which is basically they can climb any surface and such like that. This is great. This is a change from the previous one where they actually only had woodland creature. So now they can climb up walls and such. And then their spider webs have even improved. I mean, everything about these guys has improved completely. These guys now have a range of 8. It counts as a throwing weapon, and it still paralyzes people. They still have a 5-up shoot value. If you don't know or remember what these things did, I'll go ahead and read it to you. A Mirkwood spider can shoot webs at its enemies. They are treated as a throwing weapon with a range of 8. If a Mirkwood spider hits its target, do not roll to wound. Instead, the model is paralyzed, as described in The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, Strategy Battle Game Rules Manual. A model hit by a spider web can choose to expend a point of fate in the same manner as if it had just suffered a wound in order to dodge the attack. If successful, the target model is not paralyzed. So, 1, you're burning fate off of heroes if in case you try to go after them, but 2, you are wrapping up enemies in webs. Paralyze is one of the nastiest spells in the game, so it's really bad that these things can just start spitting it out. Now, of course, generally you're only going to be shooting on a 6-up because you're going to move and then fire. But if you do get the option to stand still, which of course now you can be 8 inches back from an infantry line, then you can go ahead and fire these webs at them, and it can cause some serious problems, especially even if you only get a couple guys. It actually works marvelous for you. If you actually can get your opponent to come to you, then it's even better. These guys are now kind of ish spammable. Their base sizes cause issues, I will say that. It's something you wouldn't even see by looking in this rulebook, but they're so big that a lot of times your opponent can get like 3-4 guys on them, and even with spear support, so you're having like 6 attacks dealt at you. Remember, you have a fight of 2 as well, so you are really playing these things in finesse. Really serious finesse. They can be way overwhelmed. They can have trouble supporting each other because their base sizes are so big. So just note that the fundamental weakness of these characters is actually something you won't see in the rulebook. Other than that, giant spiders are another go-to pick, because other than them, they have Fight 4 and such like that, but that's all in the Moria source books. If you want to see their profiles, go ahead and look there. Giant bats and fell wargs. The only weakness in there being fell wargs, but fell wargs are really a numbers thing to grab objectives and such. Other than that, that is the Denizens of the Dark. And that is it. I am at the end of this rulebook. I finally have covered it all. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and let me know. Other than that, we'll once all the models come out, we'll go ahead and start our How to Play, How to Buy series, because by then I'll have been well practiced with the armies. As of right now, a lot of what I've been saying is sort of theory, because I've only had a couple playtest games, and that's not enough to say you know something very well. And I'm thinking, in the future as far as when the Lord of the Rings profiles come out. Hopefully, I'm hoping by the end of this summer or something around there, we can do another book review, but this time with 3-4 times the profiles. And then I'll probably lose my voice talking in front of this camera. But I can't wait for it. This game has nothing but exciting news going forward, and I will talk to you very soon.